Hello, what's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Real Me and a movie podcast where you didn't really ask for it, but hey, we're going to give it to you anyways. This is a podcast where we talk about anything, everything, and, well, anything about movies. I'm one of your co-hosts, Chase Lee, and hey, guys, listen, if you're searching on the interwebs for another movie podcast and you wanted to find one to listen to on your way to work, going to the gym, or just wherever you listen to podcasts, and you're looking for a movie podcast where you can kind of join in the community and talk movies with us, two yokels that record this from our rooms. And so we really appreciate you. If you did take a chance on us, we have a lot of fun here. If you are new to the show, welcome. This is your official welcome. But if you're a returning listener, welcome back. But if you are new, what we typically do is we'll go over some movie news, some movie trailers that drop throughout the week, and we will commentate on them for you guys. Then we will have a review or reviews of movies that drop on said weekend that we record, and box office results to accompany that. This is episode 252. We are getting there to the 5-year anniversary. Good Lord. That's a lot. And so the movie on trial that both of us will be reviewing and dissecting further, which is actually pretty divisive amongst reviewers and audience members and stuff, that would be Bohemian Rhapsody, the film about Queen, or the film about Freddie Mercury. I don't even think it knows what it wants to be, but it is the film that exists in theaters right now, and that's what we're talking about. And of course, Joel will have a couple surprise reviews. And speaking of the Joseph, Joel, how are we doing this week? It's Halloween is done, and we are officially entering November. It's the fall's going to come here. It's going to be a little quieter on the, it's end of the year. We're all just kind of wrapping up our lives, and, Oscar season's coming up. What's going on in Joel's world over there?
Oh boy, well, it's a sale weekend at work, and if anybody knows from previous times I've mentioned it, it's a lot of stuff. It's people who want to be right, people who want to steal things in the cover of night, and in the case of yesterday, for instance, bring their own alpha keys and unlock things and take them out. And anyway, your usual sales weekend. It's pretty insane. My brain is sludge right now, so if I'm just a rambling mess, I apologize about that. I had 7-hour shift today, 8-hour shift yesterday, and if you've ever worked retail, you know how tough those are, especially on the weekend and especially on a sale weekend. Again, it's just insane. Personally, though, not really much. I had a birthday on Friday, so that was the big thing. Saw a bunch of movies that day and such things. This week was just kind of Halloween was, we didn't really have any trick-or-treaters. Our neighborhood's weird that way. I live in a neighborhood of mostly people who are retired, so there aren't very many kids in that neighborhood. They always have to come over from one of the other homeowner association places, and we don't have people who are willing to walk across 2 streets for that. So didn't have really any trick-or-treaters, but I had to work, and then we just kind of stayed home and watched Fantastic Beasts in preparation for the second movie. Let's see, what else? Yeah, that was pretty much it. Got to see family a little bit. Otherwise, just kind of rolling along. I'm 29 now, so there you go. But other than that, just kind of the usual. What about you?
Well, I have a couple things to add on top of that. One, I'm assuming kids are just getting lazier nowadays because usually when I went trick-or-treating as a kid, since I was, kind of a fat chubster, I would go to great lengths to find out where every single house was that had candy available. I mean, I would hike to neighborhood. I would go everywhere for candy. So I guess there's that. I like candy. And then the second thing is, if you guys were ever curious on who's the oldest out of both of us, it is ironically Joel by 2 months. And I say ironically because I am 4 times bigger than him, and it looks
Four
like I am
times, exactly 4 times.
exactly 4 times. Joel is the size of a Keebler elf, and I'm the size of King Kong, and so that's why our dynamic works so well. But no, it is funny that he is older than me by a couple months. But yeah, I tower the man.
And it's also just because, like speaking, plainly here, I don't look as old as I am. Generally speaking, unless I don't shave, then I'm sort of like I'm in my late 20s. But just because of his size and stature and bone structure and everything, Chase just looks older than me. And it's less because of Chase and it's more because of me. It's because I'm very, very tiny. I look very young. It's always been a thing that I've been dealing with. People assumed that I was entering high school whenever I had just graduated it. So I mean it's just the thing that I deal with, And so yeah, I mean it is kind of ironic. I'm older than people realize, and I'm the second oldest person in my store, and there are definitely people there who look like they're older than me. And in fact, the person that's older than me also has sort of that problem. He looks like he's about my age, but he's 34. So it's just one of those things, And I guess it's just because bigger, taller people look older than, even if they are younger than him, generally speaking, look older than somebody around their age who's smaller. It's just what happens.
That's just the way
yeah.
way humans are. We see a bigger person that is of abnormal size, and we go, "Oh, that person's older." And so I've been facing that demon my whole life.
You are 7'8", so it makes sense.
Well, Joel, let's not mislead the listeners.
I'm
actually
I'm
8'6".
3'11". It's okay.
I'm actually 8'6". So yes. So happy birthday to the Joseph over there.
Thank you, sir.
Celebrating his 29th, and Joel and I will both collectively cry together when we reach 30 and we realize we've done nothing with our lives except make a movie podcast for you guys in our rooms. Nah, it's we're getting there, man. We are getting to 30, but my week was pretty good. First full week living in the house. I've enjoyed it so far. First time seeing trick-or-treaters in a long time because I live in a house now, not in an apartment, so that was interesting. And
is it weird? Is it still kind of weird that you just don't live in the other place? Because I know that you were there for a while, right?
I was there for 3 years, and Joel's been over several times. I mean, hell, he's even stayed multiple nights, like in a couple trips, and so that apartment has memories, and so it is very weird. But at the same time, it's cheaper with all of us here in the house, and it just feels right. It feels nice, and so. That was kind of my week. It was just kind of settling in. I haven't really watched anything. Just watching a bunch of TV shows. I know it actually, it's perfect because one of the trailers has one of the stars in it. But since we were prepping up for Halloween, my girlfriend and I, we were watching American Horror Story Apocalypse, and I just that show is just so entertaining. It's goofy as hell. But every single season, there's always something to like, and one of those reasons is Sarah Paulson, and she's in one of the trailers we're talking about, so that's what I kind of been doing, and I'm starting to ramp up on the screenings again, seeing the Girl in the Spider's Web Dragon Tattoo Fire Pit tomorrow night. I don't know what the official title is, and then Suspiria, prep for next week, and then Widows is on Wednesday, so it is Oscar season, ladies and gentlemen, and that is my favorite time of the year.
That's quite the lineup, yeah.
I'm going to be seeing a sequel
lot of
to
really happy movies that are totally
right
great for families,
Suspiria, very family friendly. I'm surprised Disney didn't pick that up, and of course, Widows. It just seems like a really just very wholesome film about people dying in the first 5 minutes, and Widows taking the mantle, and then of course, Girl in the Spider's Web. It's just great stuff all around. So that will be my week. Cannot wait for that. So, yeah, but other than that, it's been kind of quiet, so I can't wait to ramp up the reviews for you guys. But you know what, Joel? We haven't done a show in quite a while, and so there's been a lot of stuff that's been happening. What's been going on over there in that movie industry?
Yeah, so there's a couple pieces of news. There's a diatribe I want to go on. And of course,
This
I
is
have
this
our
is true,
casting.
folks. He is ready
Yes,
to
I am
ready
ready
to do
to
it.
unload. Um, and then of course I have my Oscar beat and casting corner. So got stuff to talk about for sure. The first thing is very curious. So there is a book called "A Hope More Powerful Than the Sea," which is about a Syrian refugee by the name of Doa al-Zamel. Um, it's obviously a refugee story, so it's going to be adapted. Steven Spielberg and J.J. Abrams are producing it, and that totally makes sense. Their sort of earnest kind of approach to a story like that is going to be it does definitely makes sense. But it's the third person that's involved that is a little more curious, and that is Lena Dunham, who is going to be adapting the book. This obviously caused a big stir just because it's not great optics to have a white person, at least right now, adapting a story like this. But and it's also weird just because Dunham's sensibilities seem to go at odds with Spielberg's and Abrams. This is not because she's a woman, obviously. She just has a bit more of an acerbic kind of approach to this stuff, which is just really interesting to consider. Um, so, I don't really have much thoughts about her work. I've only seen her in like two movies, and she had a supporting role in both of them. I've never watched Girls. I never saw Tiny Furniture, so I don't have huge thoughts about that. It's certainly curious, um, but yeah, I don't have many thoughts there. But I definitely think that Spielberg and Abrams being attached to this makes sense. So what are your thoughts about this one?
Yeah, it's kind of a weird one because you hear Spielberg, you hear Abrams, and you're like, okay, this is going to be a good catch, and then you have Lena Dunham. Now, I'm not going to sit here and be on this weird hate train that everyone has on her. If people disagree with her and hate her because of her, and some of the questionable things from her, like personal stuff, I totally get that. But if we're going to talk purely what she's done in the TV world or the movie world, I have seen the first few seasons of Girls, and I don't really like her in it, but I like the show, so I guess there's that. And it's not because she's not a great actress. She has always come across to me as someone that's just really unlikable, and I didn't really care for her character on the show, to be quite honest with you. So I don't know if that will change if I saw something different with her in it. But I'm not going to sit here and just hate on her because she's her. I can tell you right now that seeing the first few seasons of Girls, it's not a bad show. I actually kind of dig it. So I actually don't know what her sensibilities would be like in feature form because I've never seen that. Now she's written several episodes of Girls, and like I said, I like the show. It's well written. Some of the characters are really, really good. So that's all we can kind of go off of. But you know what? If you are working with Abrams or Spielberg or Scorsese, Tarantino, Fincher, and they personally will want to work with you or their company wants to work with you, obviously they either believe in you or they've seen what it is that you're capable of, or they've seen a first draft of this. They've seen something, and so that kind of tells me that they are on board because they see something in her that I guess most of the people don't see. And so, you know what? If they're taking a chance on her, then I'm willing to take a chance on her too. Joel's kind of right. It is kind of weird for someone who is white to be kind of writing this story, but if we're gonna get it and it's produced by Spielberg and Abrams, it could be a contender for awards and stuff. So who knows, man? Who knows? I've only seen the first few season of Girls, so I can't really go anywhere beyond that.
Yeah, and if they're gonna get a director to take on this story, I would say, there's this director named, well, I don't know. She's Saudi Arabian, so that might be a little bit of an optics. I'm not entirely sure how the politics over there work. But in any case, Haifa Al-Mansour, who just had a pretty good year this year with Mary Shelley and also Napoli Ever After on Netflix. They might consider somebody a director of color to get this job, but certainly will be interesting to see how that all plays out. Our second bit of news comes from, I guess, Warren. I actually don't know who's taking on this in terms of the studio, but there is an anime called Attack on Titan. It's fairly popular. A couple of my coworkers, including my store manager, really likes the anime. And there's a director taking on a live action version of this. There has already been a live action version of this movie, but it is a Japanese produced live action version that wasn't very popular. It was seen as kind of unintentionally humorous in terms of the fact that it was kind of cartoonish, even though it was supposed to be live action. The visual effects were apparently lacking, and so. But there is a director taking on a new version of this story, and that is Andy Muschietti, who, of course, directed both of the It films, the Stephen King adaptations. Now, it's interesting. I had mentioned to those coworkers that he was directing it, and he's kind of an unknown variable to a lot of the fans, it seems, of this franchise. So, they don't have, for instance, like if they, if God forbid they decided that M. Night Shyamalan was going to be the director, there's not going to be as much of a controversy just because he hasn't really done anything in this particular venue. I think that people will also be mad if Adam Wingard of Death Note was doing this, just because that movie is, well, one, awful, and two, very unpopular. So hopefully Muschietti can succeed where Shyamalan and Wingard did not, in terms of both pleasing the fans of the original. I haven't seen the original. I haven't read the original manga, if there is a manga. I don't know. I haven't seen the original anime. I haven't seen that other adaptation. I just know that this is coming. Chase, are you at all familiar with the source material?
Oh, I sure am. Yeah,
you are?
I saw the. I never have read the manga, so let's just throw it out there. But I have seen the first season of Attack on Titan, or part 1, or whatever, however they go with their series, and I think it's like 30-something episodes. And I've also seen the condensed version of the whole series. I believe it was called Attack on Titan Part 1 and Attack on Titan Part 2. So I have seen those, and I can tell you right now that it works better in animated form. Now, I have not seen the live-action Japanese, kind of adaptation. You're probably saying to yourself, well, how do you know if it works then? I saw the trailers to them. I remember when they were coming out with the live-action version, I was like, okay, I'm curious. How is this going to look? Because the Titans are these giant naked beings that have, really wide mouths. And Joel's right. It kind of looks cartoony. It kind of looks goofy. And guess what? In the trailer, they looked cartoony and goofy. And I realized this is supposed to be science fiction and fantasy. It's something that it's not going to, have real world, tendencies. I get that, but it just didn't look right. And maybe it just works better for me in animated form. But just seeing the trailers to those live action films really turned me off. And I said, I honestly don't know if this movie is going to appeal to anyone of an American audience besides the people that have already seen the show and read it and everything. And so I honestly don't know if this is going to do well. Now, if you construct this trailer and you put from the director of It, that might get some more eyeballs on it just because it was a huge box office smash, which means a lot of people saw it. So you put that in there, good marketing move. I don't know. I've only seen Muschietti's only movie, with it. That's that.
Well, he also directed Mama.
Well, I caught myself and I was about to correct myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have not seen Mama. I have not seen his other movies. The only thing I have seen is it, and I love that movie. I've seen it like 3 or 4 times over the course of its year block where it opened up in September 2017, and from that to September 2018, I watched it a lot. So even though I have problems with it, I still love it. I watch it over and over again. So I do like his sensibilities as a director with the horror genre, but Joel is absolutely correct. It's going to be interesting to see if he can kind of adapt it into not only anime, but also something that's just more fantasy. And I'm really curious to know if he was chosen because he pitched more of like a horror fantasy, like kind of tone and vibe to it. I don't know. I'd be curious to see it, but I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think this is going to appeal to a lot of people, and I'll be curious to see where it goes. And it might just be one of those things where Mouchier is going to direct it, and it doesn't find a home anywhere, and maybe it has a lot of problems and a lot of budget, because this is going to be an expensive movie, by the way. The effects in this show are ridiculous for a live action, so I'm just telling you right now this is going to be expensive. I have a feeling this movie is going to kind of go up and down, this kind of like roller coaster of emotions, like, oh, it's greenlit, and then it's going to be on the shelf for a little bit. Oh, greenlit again. Honestly, it's just going to probably end up on Netflix or Hulu or something, so that's the kind of the way I see it.
Yeah, we'll get into that concept in a minute, but
is that a precursor to Joel's rant? Is that what that is?
And it's true because live action kind of limits, in a way, kind of limits creativity. There are people who can push through and do really creative stuff in a live action format, but it seems to go awry when it's anime being adapted because there's just so much involved in it. And that's definitely what happened with The Last Airbender. It's kind of considered to be what happened with Death Note, although I know that he kind of wildly took off in his own direction there. But it's like I said, it'll be interesting to see how this all comes together if the requisite amount of effort is put into it to make it a good movie. Then that's what matters. But it also kind of matters if it satisfies the fans of the original, because that opens the doors to fewer, people see that this is what you have done right, then this is how we're going to do it, kind of in this arena. It's definitely a question. All right, so there wasn't very much news in the past couple weeks, which gave me the opportunity to talk about this, and I was really hoping that happened because it's a big issue. All right. So Warner Media announced that they are shutting down Filmstruck. Now, for those who don't know what Filmstruck is, or was in this case, it's shutting down by the end of the month. It was a streaming service that was the home of a lot of movies from the Criterion Collection, but not just from them. They would release a lot of a lot of exclusive content for releasing movies onto the streaming platform that were not among their physical collections. They would also release movies onto the regular Filmstruck platform, which was Warner Classics, a bunch of other stuff that was foreign films like Chungking Express that had gone out of print on Criterion years ago, and they were kind of sticking up for these classic movies that made a big cultural impact. And the fact that they're shutting down when that was the only streaming service offering Criterion obviously puts a lot of those movies into kind of stasis mode. There were movies specifically licensed to show on Filmstruck.com, not on WarnerMedia.Filmstruck.com or whatever it's going to be when Warner Media makes their own streaming service. Obviously, some of these movies are going to move over there. I can imagine all of the Warner Classics will, but that leaves, in question a lot of these movies from Criterion that people may not be able to afford on physical copy. Now, all right. So first, obviously, big thing to mourn is the loss of such a streaming platform. I'm going to get into the specifics of why I am not particularly fond of streaming platforms, despite the fact that I watch a lot of stuff on them here in a second. But obviously, it is a big black mark. A very, very sad end of this month that people to whom this became beloved are going to lose this outlet for movies that should have been stuck up for, and it's a capitalistic thing. I mean, the site failed market wise, so they have to shut it down now. Of course, part of it is because they're moving it over to a new platform, but again, that's just kind of the capitalistic part of it. Is they've determined that their market will be more more valuable if they move a lot of these movies over. Keeping time with this news is the news that Netflix is going to be releasing 3 movies before they go onto that streaming platform. Those are one movie that we're about to talk about its trailer, Bird Box, Roma, and The Ballad of Buster Scruggs. So these 3 movies are going to receive a 1-week theatrical distribution right before their opening. So you'll all be able to see, for instance, The Battle of Buster Scruggs when it comes on the streaming platform next Friday, I should say. On the 16th is when that opens. But it will be opening in some theaters in LA and New York on the 9th. That's this next Friday as of this recording. It'll be the same thing with Roma on December 14th and Bird Box the week before that on December 7th. So that's very interesting. And also, this may not seem related, but it is, because I want to kind of start a bit of a conversation with Chase about this. At the same time that they did this, I think the day before they announced that, actually, they announced that they are canceling American Vandal, which is an incredibly popular mockumentary series that sort of follows in the format of something like Making a Murderer, but of course makes fun of that by following, in the first season, and in kind of both seasons, a couple of teenage vandals who do something kind of crude, and obviously the show is about, or quote unquote, about the investigating the crime, so to speak. It's a very popular show. A lot of people feel that it's actually one of the best shows. I know that Chase, you're a big fan of it, right?
Oh, huge fan.
Yeah.
One of our friends, Brian, we actually we talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
We were actually like talking for 2 weeks straight. We're like, man, how do you think season 2 is going to go and everything? And just to let you guys know, American Vandal is one of the best shows on Netflix, and season 2 is better than season 1, and season 1 is great. That is my quick review on that. So it is very disappointing that they canceled it.
Yeah. So here is now what happens with something like American Vandal or Iron Fist or Luke Cage or these shows that have been canceled. Guys, Netflix is notoriously awful with marketing. And in fact, it came up again this very weekend because one of the movies, one of the movies that opened this weekend on Netflix was The Other Side of the Wind, which is from Orson Welles, as in the director of Citizen Kane, the movie known to be the best movie of all time. And guess what? Did not show up on anything on the front page this week. The Other Side of the Wind. Literally, somebody looked and trolled through the entire front page, and the only way that they were able to find The Other Side of the Wind was by searching for it. And that's a bad thing, because it doesn't give the movie any sort of face time with its audience. Now, the same thing happened with Private Life a few weeks ago, which is now available on the front page. You can find it among the trending now, or the new releases, or whatever, or you might find it among things that are recommended for you. However, it wasn't immediately available, and this kind of got me thinking about how this stuff from Netflix and the cancellation of Filmstruck kind of belongs in the same conversation. And it caused me to want to talk about this a little bit because I want to tell my listeners, or our listeners, who span the globe. I can say that pretty safely because some of you are listening overseas. A couple of stories involving streaming because I do not trust streaming. I watch a lot of stuff on streaming, but I do not trust it. And I have been working for a video store for a year and a half, and I can tell you without a doubt, physical media is far, 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 far more valuable than streaming. And you might think that this is, patently ridiculous considering streaming is the new thing. Everything's going to streaming. But guys, streaming takes licensing, and licensing rights can go away in an instant. And I want to tell you all a horror story. Chase knows what this story is, but yeah. All right, so I read this on Twitter. It was a Twitter thread from the person who went through this. So somebody was talking about how they had bought a movie on iTunes. I can't remember which movie, but they had bought a movie on iTunes. It was in their library. And several months after buying it, they went to their library thinking, I haven't watched this yet. I might as well watch it now. And they couldn't find it. So they contacted Apple, which I'm sure took like 5 months for them to get back. But they contacted Apple. They finally talked to somebody who said, "Oh yeah, no, we don't offer that movie anymore." And thus, because the file that you buy within the system disappeared, the file also disappeared from the library because it is no longer licensed to Apple. It's nothing to do with iTunes itself. It's all Apple. Remember that it's Apple iTunes. So if the licensing rights shifted from Apple to somebody else, you lose that movie. And I'm sure that particular movie, whatever it was, disappeared from everybody's library who owned it. And so do not trust streaming. I know that this seems like I'm trying to go against the grain of something really popular, but trust me when I say you will be more disappointed in streaming.
Hey, Joel.
Yes?
Can you string this out for a few more minutes? Talk slowly, do whatever you have to do. I'll be right back.
Yeah, it'll be a while.
Okay, go ahead.
So, all right. So then there's another story that I want to tell y'all. This one is to tug at the heartstrings, hopefully. Last year, I was working one evening, and a gentleman came in looking for a movie called Folks. Now, I might have told this story on this podcast before, but I'm going to tell it again because it is relevant. I just can't quite remember if I did. But and if I did, I apologize. But again, it is relevant to this. So there's a gentleman who came in. He was looking for this movie called Folks. This is a movie with Tom Selleck and Donna Michi from the year 1992. It was directed by Ted Kochev. And it's, supposedly a fairly silly movie, but it meant a lot to this guy who was trying to find the movie because recently his father had passed away, and it was one that they bonded over. It's not a very popular movie with critics, not very popular with audiences, but they bonded over it. They really liked it. And, so he was trying to find it, and unfortunately, Folks has been kind of pushed off into the secondhand market, stuff like eBay and Amazon, and it's fairly hard to find because it went out of print on DVD, and so following his father's death, he was trying to look for it and couldn't find it anywhere. They had a copy that had gone missing. I think it might have been a VHS copy. I'm not entirely sure, but whatever the case, their copy that they owned, or that his father owned, had disappeared just in the years, and he really wanted to watch it, he really wanted to own it at least, and he couldn't find it anywhere. So, he came to us because we have this really intensively designed uh, system that kind of includes notations about how available things are outside of a store like ours. So we're at least able to find stores within our system that might have a movie, and none of them did at that point, so he put himself on a request list for it. And of course, because you can do that. Um, and I was the person who put him on the request list. And so several months later, we finally bought the movie in from somebody selling it to us, and his name was the first one on the request list, and he came up to get it that very evening, and I was able to sell it to him. I basically had the entire transaction. It was very moving, and it was doubly moving because when I gave him the movie, he was basically in tears. He was incredibly moved that we could find this movie for him and provide him something that was dear to him. And that just kind of connected me instantly to the fact that physical media existed partly because of the fact that, studios can release their movies on physical disc. But to consumers, eventually it becomes something akin to nostalgia. Um, and it's just this idea that streaming is great, but if you have questionable licensing rights and they disappear from a movie, then, or for a movie, I should say, for it to be on Amazon Prime, or Hulu or whatever, and they disappear, and that movie isn't really available on physical copy, then you're out of luck. And um, this week gave me a realization that I need to do my part in preserving physical copies to some degree, helping them to remain on the market for at least a little bit, and that's by buying them, because obviously in, again, a capitalistic society, that's how it works. And so, for instance, I bought the 1996 version of 101 Dalmatians with Glenn Close, which has similarly been pushed off into the secondhand market. And I also bought Ragtime, which was from Milos Forman. It's got James Cagney's last performance, the one that he came out of a 20-year retirement to give. It's been pushed off into the eBay market. It's very hard to find that. Even within our stores, only a few had it. And I also bought It Takes Two. Yes, the Olsen twins movie. It's very hard to find any of them, but it's hardest to find that one. At least on DVD. There's a lot that haven't been ported over to DVD yet, like How the West Was Fun, or any number of others, just because of, again, home licensing rights. And it just kind of sparked in me this need to kind of bring up the fact that physical media is more than just a novelty. It is a genuine article, and it is incredibly important to preserve this while it lasts. Don't just fall back on streaming as the the be all end all option. Give it its day. It's so important to preserve our movies, even if they're bad ones, because if we don't do that, then it just dies eventually, and it's just so sad. I'll give you all another example. My second favorite movie of all time is a movie called Shadowlands. It's got Anthony Hopkins. He plays C.S. Lewis. It's a great film. And it has been shunted off into the secondhand market. It's only available really on eBay. One of the most infamous examples for me, having worked at this store for a year and a half, I get a lot of firsthand kind of a firsthand account of when prices change, when availability changes with it. And the most infamous example to me is a movie called Panther, and it's from the mid-90s. It's about the birth of the Black Panther Party, It's directed by Melvin Van Peebles, and it stars an enormous cast from Kadeem Hardison to Ike Turner to Angela Bassett. And if you're paying close attention, yes, that is weird casting. Um, and it's this huge, enormous, almost Spike Lee sized cast. And it was distributed at home by two companies, I believe. Polygram Video, which has long been out of business, and Artisan Entertainment, which has also long been out of business. And it's essentially impossible to find this unless you're willing to buy the single copy on eBay that is still available for $300. And at a store like ours, that means that the options narrow. And even at our relatively useful prices, it's $150 to buy that movie. If it's available anywhere.
This is why I love Joel, because he can basically find any movie that ever existed on the face of the earth, and he'll be like, "Hey, did you ever see this documentary about like wood and like ants and stuff?" I'm like, "No, man, I didn't even know that existed." And then he pulls it up, and he's like, "Yeah, it's on eBay for like $500." And I'm just like, Joel, how much free time do you have? And then we go into a whole conversation about Joel's priorities in life. It's just a fascinating conversation. But go ahead and continue.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just the idea that basically, if you want to buy that movie, it's nowhere streaming. It's not on iTunes. It's not on Amazon Prime, even to buy rent or to rent for money. It's nowhere. So if you wanted to find it, you'd have to find it on physical copy, and you'd have to basically find the single copy that's available anywhere for purchase other than a store like ours, and it's not even at any of our locations currently. I looked today to make sure because I knew that we were recording this. None of our locations have it, so I can't find it anywhere. And so they have that one copy on eBay. It's not available on Amazon anymore. So you have that one copy on eBay, and it's $300. And so, otherwise, you start, looking like on Craigslist or something. People who want to try to part with the movie might not know that it's so valuable. And once they find out that it's so valuable, they might want to keep it, in which case that limits the options for everybody else. And it's unlikely, because of the fact that it was distributed by those two companies that are now out of business, to ever get the licensing rights to be released by Arrow Video or Vestron or whatever, or put on Amazon Prime, because there's nobody to ask. And it happened with Drop Dead Fred in the early 90s because they were also Polygram. Even the movie Bean with Johnny English himself. The DVD is no longer out of print because it's been it was the rights were given to somebody else, but its initial DVD release was from Polygram. So that particular print is out of copy now, or is out of print now. That particular print is out of print now. So, yeah, I mean, it's just this idea that basically we must preserve our physical media, because at some point it's just all gonna go away, and there's just gonna be movies that are lost because of our dependency on streaming and the shaky licensing issues that come with that. So anyway, this is sort of a conversation starter, but also just a plea to the audience. Please, I know that there's issues. I know that there are people who don't have the space to, cultivate a large selection of movies on physical copy. I understand that. I understand that there's a cost issue because, again, this is a capitalistic thing. I know that. And I understand all of that, and I sympathize with the people who can't do this to a much of a further extent than they realistically can. But whoever you are, do your part. Please, please, please do your part. I just really want people to do this. And, this news of Filmstruck being shut down and of Netflix canceling a show that it now has no incentive to release on physical copy, the first season of American Vandal, they're eventually going to bury that in the content on Netflix. Eventually, you're going to have to search for it. And eventually, because of the way the world works, because of sort of internet evolution, if you will, or internet adaptation, I guess. There's going to be a point where it's completely forgotten because people are not going to want to search for it anymore. Thus, they're not going to tell people about it. And that spreads way down to when it's completely forgotten and people accidentally happen upon it in their nightly searches for 7 hours. It's going to happen. So this stuff has an effect. It's such an important thing to preserve our physical media. Please, please, please do this. Anyway, so Chase, you didn't hear much of my rant, but I was also saying that this very weekend we had a sale, and I decided instead of just silly stuff that's usually available, I decided to buy some stuff that's not so available. So I've bought 101 Dalmatians, the Glenn Close version, because it's been relegated to the secondhand market. It's the traditional DVD that initially came out as nowhere in our system, and the special edition DVD, which is the most recent version. It's one of the first DVDs ever released by Disney. Has now been relegated to eBay and Amazon. And I decided, you know what? We had a copy. I was going to buy it because otherwise people are not going to want to go to, the Disney streaming service when they make it. I also bought It Takes Two, which is the Olsen Twins movie. Yes, I bought that because that movie is very hard to find, like all Olsen Twins movies. I didn't know if you knew that, but that's something that I've learned, working for this company. I also bought Ragtime, which is this supposedly really great Milos Forman film featuring James Cagney's last performance. It's one that he came out of a 20-year retirement to give in 1980. And it was at the top of Gene Siskel's list of the best films of 1981. Supposedly it's great stuff. And it's been shunted off into the secondhand market. And it's just, it's really sad, seeing these movies kind of go by the wayside just because of a capitalistic kind of thing where the stuff that's favored ultimately has, reign. At our work, if you sold a widescreen DVD copy of The Dark Knight, you get 10 cents. That's where we are. If you were to sell to us Ragtime, you get $4 because of the fact that this stuff just isn't findable anymore. And anyway, so that's all. I just wanted to talk about that and also get your thoughts on whether or not we need to preserve our physical media for as long as we possibly can without trying to get into the habit of trusting streaming given the questionable licensing rights.
Oh,
what are your thoughts on that? Yes.
Oh, I thought you were asking a question for the audience. Sorry.
Well, I am. I mean, if anybody has decided to or has never commented or whatever wants to comment on this, please send us a tweet. Give us what your thoughts are, because I'm definitely curious. But I am asking you, Chase, currently, what do you think about all of that?
So, I'm in favor of both. Unfortunately, it's one of those weird things to where, Joel and I grew up during 2 different eras, or actually 3 different now, and we're not even 30 yet. We've lived through VHS, DVD, Blu-ray, and now streaming. And I can tell you this. Moving from place to place with a lot of physical media is a hassle. It is one of the biggest pains in the butt you will ever experience. But then again, most people that have collections, whether they be books, vinyls, whatever, it's always a hassle to move. But you know what? What it boils down to is that I love my collection. There's some garbage movies in my collection, but I love owning them. I love physical copies. I love actually holding something in my hand, like being able to pick it out of a library and like play it, knowing that most of what I own is not on streaming stuff, and I have access to it. So that's always great. Money is also an issue because it's expensive to grow, and I've been growing mine since 2001. For 17 years now, I have built my collection to around 1,000. Then I downgrade to about 500 or 400 because as you get older, you realize that, hey, I don't really need that movie, and then you just you pawn it off for a quarter or 50 cents, and then you cry a little bit inside because you probably paid $20 for it. But when Netflix started coming around, it was just a DVD business, and I remember subscribing to it, and I would rent a couple DVDs at a time. I was like, oh, this is very cool. I've never seen this before, and you can rent stuff. It was the online Blockbuster. And so when they started moving to streaming, I'm not going to lie, I was a little hesitant on subscribing to it. Well, and also because I was a cheap college kid and I did not want to pay $12 a month, but, and so as the years have kind of grown, I'm still in favor of both. I think physical media is amazing, and I think if you are a collector of film, I think you should just buy movies regardless of popularity or obscurity within all the films out there. Buy what you want to buy, but it's always great to support this stuff. I mean, I still buy Blu-rays to this day. I'm slowly building my collection of that because I think I started in 2012, so it's only been about 6 years. But I buy what I love now, and I also like streaming. I get why streaming exists, but the real problem for me is the amount of garbage that's on streaming stuff. I have HBO, Netflix, and I bum off of someone's Hulu. And I can tell you right now, with full certainty, that, HBO is the best one. Let's just get that out of the way. Netflix and Hulu, I would say like 30% of their content is great. 70% is garbage. And unfortunately, when you hear stuff like American Vandal being canceled or Luke Cage and Iron Fist for whatever reason they want to throw out there, it tells me that more people like I gotta be very careful about what I say. I don't want to say the dumb stuff, but it seems like the stuff that Joel and I might guffaw at are the ones that are surviving. And maybe that's where the issue lies. Because Joel's right. We live in a capitalist society. It's a business. If something is streaming and it goes away, and we see something else that's on that streaming service that is stupid to us and it's thriving, it doesn't matter what we say because it thrives with the masses. And that's what kind of blows about it, is when you find stuff like an American Vandal or Making a Murderer or House of Cards or even the most recent one, which is getting the biggest amount of buzz I've seen for any show on Netflix in a very long time, which is The Haunting of Hill House. Well, that one's an exception because I think the masses really enjoy that one. But, I'm trying to think of like an obscure show that I have seen on Netflix that not many people have seen. It's escaping me. I've seen a lot of shows, but it's some of the best TV I've ever seen. So I'm of the mindset that I can't really sit here and fully say that streaming, in general, is a bad thing. I think the decisions that they make sometimes are kind of stupid with putting a bunch of garbage on there. But I do applaud the effort of making original content.
I think I get what you're saying, but I think my problem is the fact that their decisions are not just temporary.
And I totally get that. Like, whatever decision they make is permanent, and that's what kind of sucks about that.
Yeah.
But, I mean, there's thousands of hours of media going through that service to where, if a couple fall by the wayside, I can't really get too angry. You know what I'm saying? Like, if they, like, eliminated, like, half of the stuff they got on there, that would be kind of concerning to me, because even with the shows I like that get canceled, it's like, whatever, it's a business thing. But you are right, though. If for someone that really liked it, want it on physical media, it is a problem, because they're probably never ever going to release it on there.
Yeah, and that's the problem, is because it doesn't last.
Yes.
Whatever is canceled, again, I mean, maybe it's never going to be taken off there because it's Netflix and they have the licensing, but it's always going to be buried eventually. It's just eventually just not going to. I mean, you'll be able to find it, but nobody's going to know about it because it's been canceled. They have no incentive to put it on physical media or on physical copy, and thus it just kind of gets lost in the hundreds of millions of other shows that are gonna and documentaries and stand-up specials and all of the other stuff that's gonna come out of Netflix. It's a monopoly, and in monopolies, the the littlest, the stuff that doesn't sell just kind of gets tossed into kind of the crowd, the unending crowd of other stuff that's there. And so American Vandal is eventually going to go by the wayside. Eventually, people are going to remember it as this great 2-season kind of curio that Netflix still has on their site, but you know nobody's going to talk about it in the way that they talk about it now. And as this great thing, to the degree and in the volume um, um, of at the volume of what they do now. And so that's my problem, is like the decisions that they make and canceling what they cancel doesn't just ruin somebody's streak of binge watching or whatever the entire series. It isn't just about that. It's also about the fact that that has ripple effects for other shows. And it was baffling to me, for instance, when they canceled Iron Fist and Luke Cage, simply because there was a growing continuity within not only that, but also the Defenders.
Yeah.
So what's going to happen with the Defenders now? Are they just going to have other characters? And when people don't want to watch those shows because they canceled Luke Cage and Iron Fist, what's going to happen to that? Are they just going to do away with the whole thing? In which case, what use was it? And then that trickles down to other shows with continuity. And that's just how it works. And so I think I see what you're getting at, about how there is sort of this in a short term kind of a value to something like Netflix, but I think that in the long term, I think that people need to just need to kind of back off just a little bit of trusting something that is streaming. And I
Okay,
think
so
that the long-term vision for something like that is always going to be disappointing, even when there's great shows like, people love House of Cards still. And it's just starting its season without Kevin Spacey. It has a great
it's
ad
actually the
on
final
Facebook.
season.
Oh, it's the final season.
Yeah.
Okay. Whatever. I don't watch it, but it has a great ad, right at the front of Facebook. Facebook, Netflix. Where Alison Cameretta is on there, and they kind of bleed into real news broadcasts and have people on there, and it's really, really cool. And it's great. They have great actors and all of that. People are sold by that, and people enjoy that show still.
Well,
But
and
that
House of
only
Cards
that
is
only really works out
yeah.
in the long run for House of Cards. It doesn't really work out in the long run for Netflix, because then what they're doing is they're canceling a bunch of other shows that people like, and they're kind of chipping away at their brand just a little bit, and then covering it up with everything else that people do like. And so I think in the long run, honestly, canceling Iron Fist is more important in the long run. That's the key word here. In the long run, I think canceling Iron Fist, even if people don't like that show, says more about Netflix, Amazon Prime, potentially canceling one of their shows says more about Amazon Prime than keeping the show that people love. And that's always the case with capitalistic societies. The worst stuff that happens always says more about that society than the best stuff that happens. And it's because of the situation surrounding the thing that ends. And so, anyway, I do see where you're getting at. But only in terms of the quality of their work.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that's important. But I think for my conversation about a bigger picture, do you see where I'm getting at? Because
I definitely see where you're getting at. I don't know. I applaud some decisions where they're just like, we're going to greenlight this show, and it's one of the best things you'll see because they took a chance on it and no other studio would. And so, I mean, it is kind of weird that like I had this like love-hate relationship with them, and Netflix actually prompted me to buy stuff because when I was in college, I did the 2-week free trial of Netflix for when they first launched their streaming, and I never got a chance to watch this show because my parents never had Showtime. But when they threw the first 2 seasons of Dexter on there, I watched that within 2 days, and then that weekend I went to go buy it. So there is that possibility that people could watch stuff on streaming and go seek it out on physical media. I mean, that's always been my mindset where, like, if I see something on streaming that I've never heard of before or I've always wanted to see and I really loved it, I'd be more prompted to go buy it because of Netflix's awareness. So, I mean, there is that possibility, too, that it could actually, it's a small percentage of us, but, it could boost the awareness of movies and be like, oh, yeah. And then you go, to Movie Trading Company or, whatever you guys have, and you find it and you go, well, I would have never discovered that. I would have never watched it if Netflix did not have it available for me.
Yeah. It's true.
I'm telling you, man, it's the ultimate love-hate relationship.
yeah, pretty much. All right. Well, in any case, I do want to spark a discussion amongst our listeners. If you have any thoughts about this, please tweet at us, comment below, because I'm really curious how people feel about this scene. And now I'll move on to our casting corner. It's a big one. First up, though, is a remake that I forgot it was happening until I saw this bit of news. Although I think that we actually talked about the fact that it was happening. I just totally forgot. But that is Force Majeure, the great 2014 film. Sadly missed out on a nomination for Best Foreign Language Film, but it should have been nominated. It's about a family who are stuck at I'm sorry, not stuck, but are traveling to a ski resort and are kind of thrown for a loop when there's an avalanche, and the father runs away and decides to save himself rather than his wife and kids. It's not a serious situation. Ultimately, the avalanche is a bit of an anticlimax, but what he does during it is more telling than anything, and it sparks a bit of a relationship crisis. And it's a great film, really darkly funny, really touching. Great performances from Lisa Loven-Kongsley and Johan Bakunka. But now it's been tapped for a remake, and that was a while ago, and it's finally got its 2 stars. I think that maybe we actually talked about one of these castings at one point, but I can't quite remember. It does have its married couple, and they're going to be played by Will Ferrell and Julia Louis-Dreyfus. Now, it's interesting. A lot of people are complaining about Will Ferrell being in this because of the fact that he is so wild and crazy funny. I will just remind people with 3 words that he can act, and he can act very well, and those 3 words are Stranger Than Fiction. Great movie in which he gave a great performance. It's a lot more dramatic than the other stuff that he's done, or a lot of the other stuff that he's done, and he can be very good. And also a reminder that anybody can be great with the right material. So that's just a little reminder there. And now Julia Louis-Dreyfus has been kind of caught up in Veep, hasn't really done much outside of that, and hasn't really done much acting on the big screen. She's been mostly a TV actress for a long time. She's done a few movies here and there, but for the most part, she's been kind of on TV. So this is going to be one of her comparatively speaking, rare big screen roles. And I think that this is a really canny kind of decision to make, to put these two comedic actors in a comedy drama hybrid that largely kind of angles toward the drama part of it. There are a lot of really funny things in it, but for the most part, it is a drama. So I like this a lot. The second bit is that Ewan McGregor is going to be playing the villain in Birds of Prey. I like McGregor a lot. I'm not particularly excited for Birds of Prey, but it's going to be interesting to see him in a villain role. He hasn't had many of those, if any. He might have had one or two that I didn't see. And then next, Aaron Sorkin's next directorial effort, I think, is Trial of the Chicago 7. Now, the story of that one is based on a late 60s trial in which a bunch of defendants were charged with conspiracy and more. A lot of stuff surrounding the infamous 1968 Democratic National Convention. Oh boy, the story surrounding that. My dad remembers watching that at the age of 9 when it was playing out. It was apparently really kind of crazy, and it looks to be that yes, so it is Sorkin's next directorial effort, and he's got potentially his two actors, or two of his main actors in this, and they are not what I expected at all. Sacha Baron Cohen and Eddie Redmayne. It's going to shoot before Fantastic Beasts, so it's going to, which is getting behind the cameras next July, so it's going to be before that, which means that it might be in the running next year, late next year for the 2020 Oscars, which will be interesting to see. We were both disappointed with Molly's Game, but I feel like if Sorkin continues taking on material, he might settle into the director's job as long as he speaks more to his editors. That would be great if he could do that. But yeah, so this was originally going to be directed by Steven Spielberg, but he moved on to other projects after it came up, and it's a pretty dramatic story. So yeah, I'm excited for that. And then we have Michael Keaton, who's going to be in a movie called King of the Jungle. Now, in this one, he plays John McAfee, who I'm looking him up now. I'm actually not entirely sure. I know that the name McAfee kind of makes sense. Okay, so there's a person named John McAfee, and I'm pretty sure that he was the he's a tech guru who kind of went rogue. He was the creator of the antivirus that shares his last name, but basically he kind of cashed in, left society, and moved to the jungle in Belize, where he built a compound built out of gun, sex, and complete madness. It's a totally crazy story. Completely insane. I had forgotten that this was the person involved in that story, but I remember hearing about it. It's totally crazy. It's going to be written by Scott Alexander and Larry Karaszewski of the people of O.J. Simpson, and also Ed Wood, one of the best screenplays ever written. And the directors of Focus and Crazy Stupid Love are going to be the ones involved in this. So they've done Stranger Than Fiction kind of true stories before. I'm really excited about that. It's going to be Michael Keaton and Seth Rogen together. So yeah, really excited for that. Next one, there's not much to talk about. It's a secret role. We don't know anything about it. We just know the actress is Catherine Langford, and the movie is Avengers 4. Apparently she's been added in at the last second, so that's cool. Of course, Langford is Hannah Baker in 13 Reasons Why, and also was just recently in Love, Simon. Good actress, very, very good actress. And the final one is George Miller's new movie is not going to be a Mad Max movie. It's going to be a sci-fi romance called 3,000 Years of Longing, and it's going to star Idris Elba and Tilda Swinton, two of the most idiosyncratic actors working today. You never forget a performance that either of them gives, and it's a really interesting pairing. I don't think that I don't think that they've been in a movie together yet. I might be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure they haven't worked together. So really interesting news all around. Chase, what do you make of all of this?
Oh man, that's a lot to take in.
Yeah.
Yeah, to comment on the Will Ferrell thing. Yeah, I agree. Stranger Than Fiction, and I know Joel, you didn't really say you cared for the movie, but I still thought that he had a different side to him than usual, which was Everything Must Go. Did you say
I
you
didn't actually see that. I had forgotten to mention that that is one that's more dramatic from him. Yeah.
Okay,
But I didn't see it. I just know that it is.
that might have been Brian then. So Brian, if
Okay.
you're listening, why did you hate it? If not, I'm probably wrong. No, the Ewan McGregor thing is probably that one, and of course Catherine Langford, because Joel and I can go into theories or whatever. But Ewan McGregor playing a villain in a DC film, that's great. It's just like with Joel. Like I could care less about the movie, but if he's gonna join, I might want to watch it now.
Yeah.
Eddie Redmayne and Sacha Baron Cohen, what a weird mix. That's all I'll say. Michael Keaton can do no wrong, and of course Idris Elba and Tilda Swinton together, like that almost sounds just as iconic as when I didn't see the movie, but when you hear like the pairing of like him and Kate Winslet in that Snow movie.
That Snow movie. There we go.
That Snow movie. I'm gonna call it that. No, The Mountain Between Us. That's like an iconic pairing. So him and Tilda, like that's also an iconic pairing. So Idris Elba is he's just a legend. But the whole Catherine Langford thing. So what's really funny about her casting is, first of all, if you go to her IMDb page, it does, well, obviously it doesn't have the title of the movie, so it just says Untitled Avengers Movie, and on top of all that, her character is just called Actress. Like, they don't even have a character for her yet because they're trying to keep it a secret. Now, some of the articles I've been reading, because obviously everything is rumor at this point because no one knows anything about this movie unless you worked on it. A lot of people are speculating, and I can actually see this because she kind of looks like both of them, as the daughter of Tony Stark and Pepper Potts, because this movie kind of takes place years and years after Infinity War. So that's not a bad little theory. She kind of looks like them. Yeah, I mean, you can't really tell at this point just because
Unless she's grown Cassie Lang, that could be the case, or whatever her name is, the Scott Lang's daughter. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, who knows? But I think her being in this movie will actually not make me hate the fact that she is the correct age of whoever she's playing. Hopefully, because every time when I see 13 Reasons Why, I like the show, but it frustrates me because all the kids that are playing these high schoolers are in their 20s, and some of them are almost 30. And Joel and I's age, so it's
I'm a high schooler, guys.
Yeah, I'm going back to high school, guys. I have all these.
I guess I could fit in considering how young I look, but
that's true. Joel could actually fit into a crowd more than me. So, yeah. So all the casting seems pretty great, but I think my favorite one, just because I want to see it, is Ewan McGregor, and just out of curiosity, Eddie Redmayne and Sacha Baron Cohen. So that's kind of my pick
especially
for casting.
I think mine might be Redmayne and Baron Cohen because it's going to be a drama.
Yes.
And so we rarely have seen Baron Cohen in a dramatic mode. I mean, even his role in Sweeney Todd was kind of sort of like sarcastic.
Yeah.
So he's one of the best actors working, but we haven't really seen him in this kind of mode. So it'll be really interesting.
Speaking of today's movie, he was about to be Freddie Mercury for like the longest time.
Yeah, that would have been his big, I think, dramatic, or as far as playing Freddie Mercury can be dramatic, sort of his dramatic breakthrough in terms of people seeing him in kind of a different light than Borat and Bruno. these big flamboyant. I mean, again, Freddie Mercury's kind of flamboyant, but specifically satirical characters. We haven't seen him outside of that. To such a degree. So, it could be that he's still kind of playing a character who's a character. Kind of big and flamboyant, but still. Yeah, this will certainly be interesting, and I'm really excited for a movie about that particular national convention because it was insane, totally and completely insane, overrun by madness, and yeah, it was a big one. So certainly a blight on the Democrats' part, by the way, big time. Um, all right, so last bit, I'm going to be running through the sound editing. And sound mixing categories. Now, these are a bit more, and I'm trying to find them here, because I accidentally closed the window. But these are a bit interesting. So people generally don't know what the difference between these two is, and I'll just kind of tell you as you go along. But I'm going to start with, of course, sound editing. Now, sound editing is basically this is how I describe it: the space between sounds, pretty much, the length and breadth between them, and how expertly the editors in that room, Ben Burtt, for instance, to use a common example, Star Wars sound editor, places those beats. And yeah, it's whereas sound mixing is the overall presentation. And in fact, to go back in the history, there was once one called sound effects editing, which is now sound editing, and then best sound, which is now sound mixing. So that tells you basically sound mixing is the whole thing, the presentation of sound. So I'm going to first start with sound editing, and then I'll move to mixing because they are subtly different in terms of what you have to consider. So to start off with, I think that there's going to be a major play by Paramount to bring A Quiet Place into this, which is kind of ironic just because of the title that will be in sound editing. But it has expert editing because of, again, the space between sounds, which is often very long, and it is incredibly expertly produced and edited in that fashion. So I think that that's going to be a major player. Going on to the opposite end, I think that Ready Player One is going to be a nominee here because that sound, I even said it, I think, when we reviewed the movie, just needs to win. Maybe that or maybe another choice. But this or the other one that I'll mention later are definitely, for me, the top two. I think that it could come down to both of them. You also have Incredibles 2. Of course, the first film was nominated in this category. I think won this category, maybe. Might have to go back and look at that. But certainly it was nominated, and the second one has even more impressive sound editing. So that's going to be a major player. And of course, we also have Black Panther, which I think is going to be a major contender in a lot of the technical categories, and this one just makes sense for them to put that in there. But again, this is in like contention with Ready Player One. I believe that the major play here is the movie that's probably going to be nominated for Best Picture, and that is First Man, which has impressive sound across the board. Now, there are some contenders here. I think that so what happens in the sound editing and mixing categories, I've heard, is that they often kind of get behind a movie that you wouldn't think of usually being a sound contender. Like, for instance, when they nominated A King's Speech. But that was because they could only really vote at that point for The King's Speech in that category, because sound editors cannot vote, for instance, for visual effects. It's not possible. They vote now between their own category and Best Picture, and that's it. But back in 2010, they could only vote in the sound editing category. So, because that's kind of considered their niche. But since then, they've been able to vote for Best Picture, and that tells me that Roma, being the big, gigantic contender in a lot of categories, could be that this is that sort of lone nominee that doesn't really make any sense to anybody, um, and sometimes it shows up in mixing, sometimes in editing, and I think that in that case it's going to be this one where it has a bunch of other nominations, but it's kind of that one that doesn't quite make sense. That's on the bubble for me, I think. Otherwise, obviously, Bumblebee being a Transformers movie is a big contender. Mary Poppins Returns is a musical, so that's going to be a big contender. Same thing with A Star is Born, although I'll get into those two in a second. And then you have The Mule, which I think could be a major contender too, being a Clint Eastwood movie. He usually puts together a great soundscape. So those I think are the contenders. In sound editing, I have no idea what will win it. Gut says maybe Ready Player One does, but it could easily be First Man. So that's my opinion on that. And now I'm going to move to sound mixing. I decided to put these two both together. All right. So here, I think that Roma could potentially show up again as that weird nominee, although I think that it's either going to be one or the other. And here again, we have First Man, which I think is a major contender in both of these, as well as Black Panther and Incredibles 2. I think that all of these movies have great potential of being in this category and the other one. I think that these are going to be the shared ones. And now we get to the other two, which I think are going to be musicals or at least musically driven. And so first you have Mary Poppins Returns, which is Disney. They always put together a great mix in their movies. I've noticed that, especially their musicals. Think Moana or whatever. Frozen has a great mix. Wasn't nominated, but it has a great mix. They always do that. And especially with live action movies, musicals tend to do really well in the sound mixing category, often winning it. And I think that brings me to what I believe to be the potential winner, which is A Star is Born. Great mix that mixes on set singing, which is what they did for that, and the surrounding noise of everything else. And it's really impressive work on the the part of the mixers. And yeah, so I think that and First Man are potentially at the top of this, with kind of Ready Player One and maybe Mary Poppins Returns being kind of the ones to come in maybe from below, if you will. Otherwise, the contenders in this category also include A Quiet Place. It could easily show up here. Same thing with Bumblebee. Same thing with The Mule. And I also think that because the first film was nominated in this category, we should look out for Sicario: Day of the Soldado to maybe show up in here. But I'm a little less sure about that. But obviously, there are a bunch of other bubble contenders that are possible. But that's where it stands right now. Sound is a tricky category just because of how they vote is often for their favorite things rather than for the stuff that has the best sound mixing. Usually they do that, but it can go other ways too. So, Chase, do you have any thoughts about this?
Not really. I mean, you kind of nailed it. Like most of the films that pertain to like music or musicals or anything in that regard, I think they have a good chance. If we're talking blockbuster-wise, I think you're right. Ready Player One will probably do some damage. Bumblebee, my personal favorite, would probably have to be Avengers: Infinity War.
Yeah, that's definitely a contender as well.
Yeah, exactly. Just from the span of going from creating sounds, to Earth, to Wakanda, to space. It's just, that was such an epic movie that I can't even imagine how many cuts and how many mixes they had to do sound-wise. And my personal pick for the kind of indie film would be First Man. And that is one of those films, just like, I forgot who said it, but it was like Dunkirk, where like that was an experience. You needed to see that in a theater, and if you listen closely to the music, listen closely to the flights that Gosling had to take in the movie, it's just like, it's incredible work, man.
Yeah, and that actually might carry it. I think I'm gonna more firmly place my foot in the First Man corner for sound editing, because I think that I mean I'm still going with Stars Born for sound mixing. That's such a critical darling. It's going to be the thing that they like the most, I think. But when they do see First Man, I think that they will definitely go back to their feelings about Dunkirk, and because they're very similar experiences orally, and or audibly, whatever. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I think that they're going to go back to their feelings and kind of be reminded of that, and I think that might carry it
Well,
to
it's
victory.
also like with Dunkirk when we were talking about it, it is very, very, very hard to recreate a war scene through audio. The same applies to a space shuttle taking off. Like they they couldn't film that stuff. Like you have to recreate that from scratch, and you can't just record on-set audio of a space shuttle taking off and just call it a day. No, you have to
Yeah,
create everything from the takeoff to the actual ride up into space and how it changes from going from under the stratosphere into over the stratosphere into space. Like it's incredible work, man. And so I actually think that First Man actually has a very, very strong chance of actually taking both.
Hmm. Okay. All right, guys, we're gonna move on to our trailers for the week. Chase, take us through the first one.
All right, so the first one, speaking of Joel's 5-year rant on Netflix, we have a Netflix movie coming out. And this one stars good old Sandy Bullock. And this one, it tells the story. I have the tab open here. Sorry, guys. Of a woman and a pair of children are blindfolded and make their way through a dystopian setting along a river. And so, I had no idea this even existed. The trailer dropped, and Joel put it on the list. So obviously, I took a look at it, and it looks good. I guess. I mean, I would have to see it, but I also might be on this American Horror Story kick because Sarah Paulson's in it. But Sandra Bullock, you know, she's not as in many movies nowadays, and I did not see Ocean's 8. I know Joel did. But I've always liked her, whether it be the goofy comedies that she's always in, or even the more dramatic stuff, or when she does her action films. Like, she's just one of those actresses to where she could do any genre, and I'm down to see. And so this one kind of reminded me of like The Road with Viggo Mortensen and Cody Smith McPhee. It kind of had that vibe, except it's a little less in quality cinematography wise and stuff, and it's made for a streaming platform like Netflix. It's not to say that's a bad thing, but this trailer did just kind of look like something that would appear on streaming this Friday or whatever. But yeah, it looks solid, and I think Netflix nabbing people like a Sandra Bullock or a Sarah Paulson to come do these Netflix movies is just a testament to whoever the hell is running up the higher ups up there and who they're convincing. Because I'm curious on how they convince these actors to do this. But it's got like that dystopian vibe, and it's going to be all about survival. And of course, we had movies like A Quiet Place earlier this year. Speaking of that, and it also kind of reminded me of that vibe wise. So I think for a good night of streaming, I think this would be a perfect movie for that. And I'm not gonna say it looks like the best thing ever this year, but it looks pretty solid. If I had to look at the trailers that Netflix has pumped out recently, and I had to pick one to watch, this would probably be higher up there as a suggestion than others. So I mean that's kind of what I'm thinking.
I think this looks really strong. I think it established a real sense of mystery, and I think that I mean it's just kind of like my bag, if you will. It just establishes this real sense of mystery. Like, I really want to know what's going on here, and I really want to know how they get out of this. I want to know if this movie is as bleak as it looks, because it looks pretty bleak. And you're right. I mean, it's sort of in that kind of the way The Road was. It's a very bleak movie. Great stuff. Love that movie. And yeah, so I'm really intrigued by it for sure. I think Sandra Bullock looks really strong. Sarah Paulson looks solid. The premise looks really gnarly. I like the premise a lot. That yeah, it looks really good. I'm a fan. I'm looking forward to seeing this. I don't know if I'm gonna immediately watch this. I've got other stuff to see in December, but certainly I'll catch this down the road. Our next trailer is Cold Pursuit. This one is yet another Liam Neeson action movie. I don't think that this one is directed by Jean Colicera, though, like his last 18 of them were. But this one is basically his son has died. All of a sudden, appears to be caught up in a drug thing, so he goes on a revenge spree. In the cold of, I think, Alaska, certainly far north. I don't know if it's Alaska, but it also stars Emmy Rossum in her first big post-Shameless role. She's just announced that she's leaving that show, and this is kind of going to be the one that plays either alongside or just after her exit. And it also has, oh gosh, who's the other person? Plays, I think, his wife. Man, I forgot. Anyway, this one looks kind of fun. I like how this trailer was edited to make the movie appear, I think, a little more playful than it's gonna be. Certainly a lot of his action movies are playful in that way. Some of them are way over serious, like Unknown, but Nonstop played a lot with expectations, for instance. And I think so did Run All Night a little bit in terms of some of those. I don't know if this looks quite as visually adventurous as those are, but I think it looks pretty solid. It looks like a good time. It's right there at the beginning of February, which makes sense. That's where his movies tend to come out. They usually find, semi-success at the box office, so this will definitely work out for him. Yeah, so I think it looks pretty good. What about you?
I mean, it looks like another Liam Neeson movie. And that's not to say that's a bad thing. I think Joel nailed it, because typically his movies fall into two camps, where it's going to be kind of fun, cheeky, playful, and just a balls to the wall action film, or it's going to be a balls to the wall action film and they're going to try to make it as serious as possible, and you don't buy into any of the drama that's being played out. What really turned this into a kind of cheeky, playful one was the song choice. When you're playing "Don't Be" or Joel, I'm blanking. Don't Be the Reaper. Anyways, you know what song I'm talking about if you watch the trailer. And so when you hear that song, you're like, okay, this movie's not going to be serious. And so that established a tone for me. That established some type of vibe going into it. And now if I'm in the mood to watch like some dumb action film in the coldness of February, then congratulations, this is the one for me, because it does. It looks kind of fun, and I think Liam Neeson set in like a cold, like mountain setting is kind of interesting, because he hasn't really done that before in a cheeky way, because he did it in a serious way with The Gray, but like that was a long time ago. So yeah, I'd be kind of curious to see it.
Yeah. All right, sir. What about this next one?
All right, so this next one that is just I'll go ahead and make the joke. All right, so I Feel Pretty 2 is coming out this year, and I had no idea. Next year, sorry. So it's not I Feel Pretty 2, but it definitely has the same type of, I guess, atmosphere, if you will. And this one's called Isn't It Romantic? Now, this one stars Rebel Wilson from what seems to be, I guess she died, and she came back because she is just not in stuff anymore. I know she was in Pitch Perfect 3, but even so. So it seems like she does stuff every 20 years. So she's in this one, and she plays a main character that is just, she's just not having luck with her life, with her love life or her work life. It's just not working out for her. And so, Joel, I completely forgot because I saw this trailer and kind of forgettable, but she bonked her head, right?
Yeah, I'll get to that when I talk about it.
Okay. So I just want to make sure I got the injury correct. So she bonked her head, and she wakes up, and now her life is a romantic comedy. Like, literally, it's very self-aware. She knows that there's tropes happening around her. Well, okay, so it's almost got like the what Joel kind of has his problem with Deadpool in a way where it's going to comment on the tropes of romantic comedies. It's going to make fun of them, but also play into them as a traditional romantic comedy. I could care less. It didn't really make me laugh. Interesting concept, sure, but we just saw something similar to that this year with I Feel Pretty, and with the whole head bonking, and you're in this alternate universe, or your character has changed. It's just, I don't know. It's just not for me. It comes out Valentine's Day next year, so it's going to play very well into the crowd of people that love to go see these movies on Valentine's Day. Not for me. Don't really care. I know Joel is just like super eager to watch it. I mean, listen, when I saw this trailer online, I watched it. I was like, yeah, I didn't really care for it, but as soon as I ended up watching it, Joel texted me. He's like, "This has got to be my most anticipated for next year," and I was a little shocked, but I think he's going to explain why.
No. All right. So
you're like, no.
So the reason that I was kind of playing coy with the thing about how she bonked her head, yes, she does, but we got to place a bit of context to that injury, because during that moment she's literally being mugged, and I just felt like, what? Let's maybe not do something that distasteful in your romantic comedy setup. It's just it's a bit manipulative, because that's a thing that women have to worry about every day, being mugged because they're women and seen as weak and all of that stuff that I won't get into. But yeah, it's just a bit distasteful to me. But anyway, whatever the case, getting into the trailer, yeah, no, this doesn't look very funny. This is another thing where they're just basically, listen, okay. Women are funny. I'm not even going to say women can be funny. Women are funny. Women actors are funny. Women comedians are funny. I do not find Rebel Wilson funny.
Agreed.
I feel like I don't even find her a good actress. I think that every single thing that she does with her face is constant overbearing, overacting. That's just me. People do this shtick of hers very well, and she's not one of them. And yeah, I don't get the appeal. I never liked her in any of the either of the two Pitch Perfect movies that I saw. I didn't see the third one, largely because I just was tired of her. The second movie in particular is awful, and it's because largely because they put a lot of emphasis on her character in that movie. And I just don't get the appeal of her, and I don't get the appeal of this premise as it's set up, because again, yes, you're right. It's exactly like Deadpool for me, where it just seems to be like winking at it without actually offering any sort of insight into a satirical angle on this setup. There's a bunch of meet cutes. There's the gay best friend, and it's the gay best friend without actually having any sort of commentary about how he's the gay best friend. So he's just going to be the gay best friend who's really flamboyant, and the joke is that he's flamboyant. And it just doesn't seem to fit. It's like it's straight out of 1998 to me instead of 2018, and I don't get it. It doesn't look amusing. I laughed a little bit at the final joke where she's trying to set up a thing with Liam Hemsworth, who shows up as one of her, I guess, beaux or whatever, and they're trying to have sex, and it keeps like repeating itself, and so she's obviously stuck in the structure of a thing, and it's a PG-13 romantic comedy, so that's part of the joke too, is there's not going to be any sex if she tries to do that. That's pretty cool. If they have a lot of that, maybe I'll like it, but they're not selling it that way. They're just selling it as this, minor wink on the genre, and I'm not convinced. So yeah, this is my least favorite trailer of the week. On that basis, I mean, it's not particularly an awful trailer. I'm not like totally like, dreading this movie or anything like that. I doubt I'll see it in theaters, but it's a cute concept. They just are not selling it well, I guess is my point. But yeah, I just I don't get it. So our next trailer is going to be Spies in Disguise. And this is the, I believe, first animated film featuring voice work by Will Smith since Shark Tale back in 2004. I'm pretty sure, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that that's the case. At least in like a main role context. I'm pretty sure he's not done any. But somebody correct me if I'm wrong on that. In any case, this one he plays a debonair, suave spy who gets turned into a bird by the weird experiments of a teenager. I don't know how that works, but anyway, and he's got to figure out how to live. I guess they don't really give any sort of context into a story in this movie, but that's the setup: is that he's turned into a bird. I thought that as a teaser trailer, this is pretty amusing, especially the last joke when we get a first-person perspective of a bird who has obviously their eyes are on either side of their head, so they see very differently from us, and it takes advantage of that and in a pretty amusing way. But it does look pretty throwaway, I gotta say. It looks amusing. I'm gonna have to see more to be even remotely convinced that this is something that is worth our time, but still, it looks mildly amusing. So, what was your takeaway on this one?
I'm kind of like with you. Like, I actually like that in bit with the eyes because
Yeah,
it was just the way Will Smith sold that line of dialogue with the first person perspective imagery, and so that was actually like worth a chuckle. But I think you're right in terms of like the teaser. It was fine. It's just it doesn't really tell me much. It doesn't really get me invested into the movie. It was just like, here's this comedic bit. We hope you come take your kid to our movie type of deal. And it's like, well, I want a little bit more than that. And, this is, it could be a throwaway movie. It could be something special. But I think from the teaser, it's definitely a throwaway. And it's that type of movie that you go see in a theater for an hour and a half. You walk out going, all right, cool. And then you go like have some lunch or something. And then you forget about it. So, I'm not saying it was the greatest teaser. I did laugh. It was effective. But I think I need to see more before I am convinced that I need to go see this opening weekend rather than what Joel does most of the time, which is rent it. So that's kind of where I'm at. But I do think that Will Smith is one of these actors that can sell any animated role because the guy just oozes charisma, and that's what you kind of need in a recording booth when you're doing these animated voices. You need someone to make us believe that that's not Will Smith that we're hearing. It's, this character or this bird. And I think he sold that in the trailer. So I'm hoping
it is a clever role for him because what
yes.
he's basically starting out as a Will Smith character.
Yes.
I mean, he's basically starting out as Agent K. I just had to remember whether that was Agent K or J. But anyway, he's basically starting out as kind of his Men in Black character, is my point. And then he's moving into the bird, So it's a total reversal of like, now he's a bird and he's not anything like Will Smith at all. So anyway, it is a clever role for him to take on. All right, give us this last trailer, which is totally the same exact trailer as what we just talked about.
Yes, 100% same. No, this actually, I was also going to make this joke. This is Black Swan 2, with, Joel, how would you pronounce this? Is it Vox Lux?
Yeah, Vox Lux. Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know if there was like any, accent on it or whatever, but, this one is Vox Lux, and this one tells the story of Natalie Portman. She is a pop star, and we get to kind of see her be a pop star, whether it is inside of her concerts or whether it's her walking out in the street, and we kind of get to see this behind-the-scene curtains of this viewpoint of this character in the pop star role. And I gotta tell you, I know I made that joke, but this trailer oozes Darren Aronofsky. It's as if he made a Black Swan equivalent and cast Natalie Portman again and made another movie. It actually does look like it's tackling the same themes with not obsession, but well, it could be like obsession with like fame and stuff, but it's more of a character
Rather
study.
than performance. Yeah,
Or
I totally, yeah.
but yeah, it's more of a character study within Natalie Portman, and we get to kind of see this very very surreal take on what a pop star is and everything, and so it almost feels like it takes place in like this alternate universe, but it also feels grounded at the same time, and so that's what I kind of like about the trailer. And it does remind me of something that Aronofsky would do, and I've never heard of this director and writer before, but just given the trailer, this looks like it could be one of those situations where, kind of like what Black Swan was, where I don't think a lot of people went for Aronofsky. They went for Natalie Portman, like people that see like 3 movies a year. But then they walk out going, "That was such an amazing performance from her." I'm thinking this is the same way, where it's like I don't even think people know this movie exists. I don't even think they know what it's about, but they'll see it because of Portman, and I think they'll be blown away because she is definitely one of the best actresses out there. I know a lot of people don't really care for her. I don't understand why. She has an Oscar for Black Swan. Speaking of that, and she's also been talented ever since she's been a kid with like Leon the Professional and stuff. So this just looks like one of those weirdo movies that she has chosen to do next, and I'm all on board. This is, as Joel would say, this is my stuff. This is what I live for. These type of interesting kind of art house type of movies. So I like the trailer quite a bit.
Yeah, this is my favorite trailer of the week. I really like the energy that's kind of being built up here. It's a really uniquely edited trailer. Sometimes it doesn't let them even like finish their word or whatever before it cuts to a critic quote. I like that. It's sort of offsetting or not offsetting, off kilter, I guess. Portman looks amazing. Of course, she's one of the best actresses working. The people who don't like her are morons. So I'm just gonna say that. Black Swan is a great movie and a great performance. This definitely looks to be in that sort of league, I guess. And it looks really strong all around. Looks visually unique. Looks like a really interesting premise. She plays apparently a former school shooting survivor, which I didn't realize until I read somewhere else that that's what the character is. Who kind of turned to pop music and kind of, as you said, is obsessed with celebrity. And yeah, it's really a great trailer. And it's good casting. Raffi Cassidy as her daughter. She's from Tomorrowland. She was the robot girl in that movie. She looks a lot like her, and she looks like she could be her daughter. So good casting, Mr. or Mrs. Casting Director. Yeah, really, really a big fan of this. It's a great trailer. So anyway, let us know what your favorite trailer is, listeners. And what was yours? Is yours also Vox Lux?
Yes.
Okay,
By
yeah.
a long
I mean,
shot,
you
yes.
definitely had the most positive things to say about it. So, all right, now we're going to move into our shared review, and that is going to be, of course, Bohemian Rhapsody. Now, this is the new movie, for better or worse, from director Bryan Singer. Kind of weird saying that these days, but it's true. With uncredited work from Dexter Fletcher. Of course, everybody knows the backstory on that. But anyway, it also stars Rami Malek as Freddie Mercury, or I should say Farouk Bonsara. I think that was his original last name. Who was the son of Indian Parsi immigrants to Britain, although he was born in Zanzibar, and he grows up in a conservative household, but longs to break out of it, and eventually does by becoming the lead singer of Queen, the pioneering rock group from the mid '70s to the mid '80s. That was their peak period. The movie tracks his progress and the band's progress through the charts with such songs as the eponymous one, and also songs like "We Will Rock You" and "We Are the Champions," "Radio Gaga," etc. And all up until their performance at Live Aid, which was the 1985 charity concert for the Ethiopian famine. Um, all right, I'm gonna just step away real fast. Chase, take it away with your review, sir, since I
Okay.
already know what you think anyway. So,
Yeah. So going into this movie, I was really excited. I really love Queen's music. I've been listening to it for the longest time, ever since "We Will Rock You" and uh, you a couple others that have been playing in movies throughout Joel and I's kind of childhood. I've always been fascinated by their kind of experimental take on music, because none of their songs are similar. They are all unique in their own way, and that's what makes them so different than other rock bands or any band in general, is because they were willing to take risk, and they were willing to do something different than the status quo, and that's what kind of got them on the map, was doing these kind of like weird experimental tracks, and that's why people like them. There's always a song that you can love from them, even if you don't love their whole songography, if you will. And so when we saw the trailer to this, I was super pumped. I love Rami Malek. I've seen the first season of Mr. Robot, and I saw his ass in Need for Speed. That is not a joke. He was naked in that movie, and there you go. No, that movie was not good. But when you watch like stuff like Mr. Robot, you start to realize that, whoa, this guy's on a whole nother level of acting that you just can't even comprehend, because Mr. Robot is such a perfect character for him, because he looks like an Elliot. He looks like a hacker, someone that doesn't sleep for days on end and is paranoid all the time. Like, he completely can pull that off. And so, been a huge fan of Mr. Malek because of that show. And so when he was cast as Freddie Mercury, because for the longest time you had Sacha Baron Cohen attached to this project forever. But the reason why he was, booted off the project, because the Queen did not agree with his, kind of take on the movie, and so they ultimately had to part ways, because the rumor is he wanted a more kind of hardcore version of it, where you get to see the kind of R-rated side of Freddie Mercury. And of course, this movie did not go down that route. It more down a route of a PG-13, kind of safer kind of route. And so, either way, even with all the drama, with all that, I was still down to see it, because the trailers have sold me, and I enjoy Queen's music. So I saw the movie, and I've seen it. Oh God, it feels like forever ago. But it was a good 2.5, almost 3 weeks ago, and I will say this: I like the movie. I have kind of a couple of issues with it. Let me just say this: I understand why people hate it. I understand how people can look at this and go, this is not what Freddie Mercury was. This is not who he was. This is a very safe, watered down, I've even seen terms like homophobic and all this stuff. I'm just going to tell you guys this. First of all, I am not homophobic. I think Joel and I can speak for him. Him and I both. We are so pro-gay that I don't think we could make it any like louder or clearer. I have a real issue with some of the people I've seen on Twitter saying, if you like this movie, then you are homophobic, like the movie suggests. I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about the movie. And I just want to let you guys know that it just irritated me that I felt like I was being called out because I like the movie. I'm not saying I love it, but simply suggesting that you like this movie and you're homophobic because you like it, it's just not right, and I don't like that at all. But here's the deal: I understand people growing up like with Freddie Mercury or with Queen, and following this guy's story or the band's story very close, I can understand why this movie could be irritating, but I liked it. I will admit that a lot of people's one of people's biggest problems is that it's a very safe movie. There's really no risk taken. It's very paint by the numbers. But yeah, I'm not going to argue with you. That's actually true. But I think what worked for me and what kind of overcame the average nature of this this movie was the performances, was the editing, was the overall direction. I still thought that the overall direction, even though it was a tad, safe, very very skimmed over, almost like a Cliff Notes version of Freddie's life or Queen's existence. I get that, but I still thought it was such a strong kind of directorial area where from start to finish I was invested, because the director directed Rami, directed everyone else to act a certain way, and they were able to pull these type of performances that just fueled the movie, and I was invested, and I have to give the movie props for that. And by the end of it, I thought to myself, like, yeah, I understand people's complaints, but I still liked it. And it's very hard for me to say that, because I didn't want to feel like I was embarrassed because of all the homophobic things. And I will say this, because I saw it with my girlfriend, and we looked at each other because we heard about all the stuff that people were saying online, and I didn't see the movie as homophobic. Maybe I'm blind. Maybe I don't know. Maybe Joel can teach me. And I don't want to sound ignorant, but I watched the movie. I sat down and thought about it, and I did not see it as a homophobic, slam towards gay people or bisexuals. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. And like I said, maybe Joel can teach me, because I do want to learn if I am missing something, but I did not see it that way. Okay, so to get all that out of the way, to jump into the movie, its runtime is a tad long, but I think, like I said, for the most part, I was invested from start to finish. I do like a lot of the sequences in the movie, whether it be some of Freddie's inner struggles, or whether it be Queen making a song, or even that awesome 20+ minute long sequence at the very end with the Live Aid concert. There's a lot of great nuggets and a lot of great moments in this that I found to be compelling, and I really think it was just from the committing performances and the committing people behind the camera. I just thought, for the most part, it was a pretty well done experience that I just found myself kind of thinking about over and over again, and really enjoying some of the stuff that I saw. Now, I will agree that one of the bigger issues, once again, there's a lot of issues that people have, is that this movie didn't really know what to focus on. Was it supposed to focus on Queen as a band, or was it supposed to focus on Freddie? And that's where kind of my main issue is that it didn't know really what it wanted to focus on. Now, not being alive, I mean, Freddie Mercury died when I was like 1 year old, so I don't know the history of the man. I don't even know the history of Queen. I just know I like their music, right? But when you start to do research on Freddie or the band, it's a fascinating story. I just wish the movie would have chosen one route and stuck with it, because these moments of greatness that I found to be compelling in the movie, you have, they're like two separate movies, where you'll have a scene with like Freddie and he's talking to someone, or like you see him really struggling with a lot of inner demons, so to speak, and you're like, wow, that was really great. And then it would, the next scene will jump ahead and it'll go to a recording session for Queen, and they'll stay on that for like a good 20 minutes. And it's like, okay, these kind of like jumps are really kind of jarring in sequence because you want to kind of focus on one or the other while having the other as a backdrop. So I don't care which one you go for, but I really wish they would have stuck with one and went with it. Because it almost does feel like two separate movies. And I feel like this story and this richness of a character and or the band would actually benefit more from like a miniseries or something. Because this goes back to the whole like cliff noted version of this movie. Even though I enjoyed it, it still feels very, very, just like, hey, this happened. Next sequence, this is another cool event in their history, and then just kind of moves on from there and there. But I still think there's a lot of good things to like about it. Going on to the performances, Rami Malek is amazing. Mostly everyone agrees, even the people that hate it or even loved it, everyone agrees that Rami Malek is amazing. I don't really need to say any more. He embodied, I think, what Freddie Mercury was probably like, and what is so difficult about this performance that I know a lot of people aren't really touching upon is that, yes, Rami Malek is a great actor and he can deliver lines of dialogue in a very convincing way, but with Freddie Mercury you have to be convincing in a physical way as well, whether it be moving on stage or making the right facial expressions. It's such a physical performance demanding wise that you have to be 110% into it. And I think from a physical level and an emotional level and just speaking dialogue level on the most basic form of acting, I think he nailed all three of those, and that's why his performance kind of, in some ways, for better or worse, for depending on who you are, it does exceed the actual movie itself, and he does drive the movie. Everyone else is fantastic in terms of like supporting role. I loved the people that played his parents. I loved the other, band members. I loved the other various characters that they kind of intertwined with throughout their life. I loved the young lady that played his, love interest.
From Sing Street, by the way.
Yeah, from Sing Street, exactly. And so she was excellent. I really enjoyed watching her. So
I've enjoyed seeing her pop up and stuff. She's also in Apostle on Netflix.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah,
See,
and she was in
the
Black Coat's Daughter last year from A24. She pops up and stuff occasionally. She has a really good agent. So.
She's just
talented,
kind of like this nice shining light on a project, and there's nothing wrong with adding talent. And then I guess the last thing I'll say is that of course the soundtrack is pretty great, and I thought the kind of sound mixing of the concerts that they showed were pretty great. It was like the type of mixing and editing that was so in the moment, like you feel like you're there in the concert, and so that I know that takes that time to do that. And speaking of the concerts, I did mention that the last sequence is pretty riveting to watch, and I actually thought they were going to play a little bit of it and then cut to something else and it ended, but I actually applauded them for keeping on the entire concert because it really kind of showed the power and the influence that Freddie Mercury was and that Queen was. So I really appreciate that. But that whole sequence was really great, and it really showed the magnitude of that concert. I will say that the green screen work could have been tweaked out a little bit in that scene, but I still think it did it justice. So listen, I'm kind of going back and forth, so you're probably like expecting me to like give it like a C or like a C plus or whatever. But you know what? I think I was comfortable with edging it up just a hair to a B minus, and I'm gonna give it that strong minus just because it is a paint by the numbers. It doesn't really know what it wants to focus on, but I still enjoyed it overall. It's not going to make my top 10. It's not going to make any type of list, but I will say that maybe I'm just, and this is a perfect segue into Joel's review, because maybe I'm just not understanding why people hate it so much. I can understand like not really caring for it or not liking it because you're not either a Queen fan or you're just not into music biopics or you just think it is a generic biopic. But Joel, I mean, obviously you talk down to me quite often, but try not to do it here. Like I want a serious discussion. Like, can you tell me like why people are just not responding to this as well as you think they would? Because I mean, Queen is and was a powerhouse of a band, and Freddie Mercury is top 3 frontmen of all time. So why do you think this movie is
top one? Let's just say
top one. So it's like, what for a movie that you feel like would be extremely important, in that regard? Like, why is it not connecting with people?
So you asked me not to be condescending.
I mean, that's fine. If you want to talk down to me, that's totally cool. I would like to understand.
The simplest answer to a question like that is because you also have the filmmaking to consider. And so just because something is great doesn't mean that the movie about that great thing is going to be great. But that's the simplest answer. So, all right. I was excited for this. I'm a huge fan of Queen. This is not my thoughts on the movie yet. I was disappointed that they didn't ever do Fat Bottom Girls here. But anyway, whatever. That's one of my favorite songs. It's great stuff. We play Queen a lot at work over the intercom. So we have to play music basically every second. So we have a classic Queen hits album, and we play that. So I was excited for this. Moving past the person himself, I think that Bryan Singer has done very strong work as a director. That doesn't mean that I don't want him to not work anymore, if I followed that correctly. I don't know if I did, but anyway, yeah. So I was excited. It looked really good. I thought that Rami Malek was really inspired casting if we couldn't have Sacha Baron Cohen. Unfortunately, I feel like listening to a classic Queen hits album will give you just about as much insight into Freddie Mercury as this movie does. There was a lot more to Freddie Mercury than how this movie framed it. I can, from afar, kind of give you a bit of insight into maybe why people are saying that the movie is homophobic. I don't think that I've seen anybody say that people are homophobic if they like it. I think that I've maybe seen that once. It's a short-sighted argument, but it's sort of in a certain way understandable. Maybe not warranted, but I think it's understandable because there's a lot about this movie that is short-sighted. It is short-sighted about Freddie Mercury's sexuality, and in fact, it kind of avoids it until the ending. And until that point, it's essentially two things. One, it's a source of shame, and two, it's a target of prejudice. And that's the only things it is. So that's a problem, and I don't think it really has the confidence to confront that until, of course, the end, at which point it becomes a major figure in the AIDS crisis because he contracted it, and that's how he passed away at the age of 45 in 1992. So there's that. All right, so now I'm going to get into the specific points of the movie. I think that this is just about the most ordinary and dull way you could tell the story of Queen, and I think it is broadly the story of Queen, as told primarily through the prism of Freddie Mercury, because it follows the entire band on their way. It focuses mostly on Freddie, but it does tell the story of the whole band. He was the one who replaced their lead singer when he left, before the band became known as Queen, and before it got its bass guitarist, John Deacon. But it goes from that until the Live Aid performance, and at that point, basically, they kind of break up. That's not really a spoiler if everybody knows the story of Queen at this point, so it's not really a spoiler to say that they were already on the rocks. That was their first performance together in a while. Nearly unbooked. Something that I didn't realize was that it was so close to being unbooked for Live Aid. Very, very close to not happening at all, and in fact, it was perhaps the greatest performance at Live Aid, the whole 17-hour thing. Um, so that's interesting. Um, but yeah, so it does tell the story of Queen, but primarily focuses on Freddie, and still in the process doesn't really offer any insight beyond what we already know and beyond the simplest um, terms of what Freddie of the influence that Freddie had on the rock genre as a frontman who was particularly idiosyncratic and kind of outrageous. Um, he is kind of a cipher for most of the length of this movie, I think. Um, we get like the barest minimum of development within this character, and a reminder that he does become a character when he's part of a movie. And as a character, there's barely any development of him beyond the simplest stuff. And so there's a big problem there, and I think that largely has to do with the screenwriter Anthony McCartan, who basically just takes this very, very traditional approach to the character of Freddie Mercury. Just as you said, here's what happened, 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 and it's extremely didactic. It's extremely broad, and it's extremely typical of the biopic genre to do this. And in order to do it well, you have to juggle all of these things in a way that that respects the scope of a life. And here, I feel like it's just so simplistic that it doesn't do that. And so, all right, now here's where I become controversial. Guys, Rami Malek's performance is a serviceable impersonation, and that's about it. On the basis of what the movie gives us, there really isn't much that Malek can do to elevate the writing, and that's half the battle. I feel like he is struggling against material that is so confined to a didactic, very, very straightforward presentation of a life that he looked, at least to me, to be struggling against two things. And to make the obvious joke, one of them is the false teeth, which are always distracting. And two, this presentation of the character, which is so closed off from being much more than sort of this mythic musician, that that it never allows him to break free of the confines of this particular structure. And no, I did not come up with the break free pun before the review. I literally just thought of it as I was about to say it. Anyway, yeah, I think that he is okay at best. I don't get the praise for this performance that so many have lathered upon him. He's a good actor. I've been a fan of his since I saw him as an American of Middle Eastern heritage who becomes a terrorist in an episode of 24 back in 2010, I think. It was the last season before they took a break, and he was great. He plays really well as Mayor Winningham's son. They have great chemistry. He's a terrorist with a conscience who's supposedly who starts questioning his devoutness to his sort of mission that he has in the movie, and it ends tragically, of course. But it was a great little performance that really showed me that, and I even remember thinking this guy has a future, and I wasn't really surprised to see him kind of cast as these, I'll just say it, kind of weirdos. He plays a lot of weirdos. He has that, and not to insult him, this is actually a compliment. He has that sort of unique look He's got the kind of the big eyes, the he's already got an overbite himself somewhat, and he's a commanding dramatic presence. But here I feel like he's taking on this big role that isn't given enough time to develop beyond the very, very basic um, concept of a an influential rock star. We never really see him as a human, and part of the failings of that are the short-sightedness of the film to confront his sexuality, which he said was bisexual, and the movie constantly says is gay. And there's a difference between the two, and there's been a lot of complaints about the fact that this essentially is bisexuality erasure. This fundamental part of him where he understood that he was attracted to both sexes or to two sexes, I should say, um, as kind of seen through his battling the inner demons or the inner struggle kind of between the men that he was attracted to in this character played by Lucy Boynton, Mary Austin. Um, and it's so simplistic. There's never really any insight. It has this incredibly condescending attitude toward him in these two sequences where one, Mary literally tells him that he's gay when he's just, said, I'm bisexual. And then another character, a small one who just kind of comes in at the end and ends up being kind of a force for good in his life, tells him to come back when he loves himself. And it's just this incredibly condescending attitude toward that. So that's some of the attitude toward that part of the storyline. And also, I just think that it's a failing of the storytelling, and it's really disappointing because there's so much life there, and I don't think that the movie is prepared or is willing to confront that head on. So I'm really like going down on this. I think that some of the supporting performances are a lot of fun. Mike Myers shows up in a neat meta joke that is really fun to see considering his past with Wayne's World. And I won't, people probably figure it out now, but I won't give it away. That's a really cute scene, and it's a solid performance too. He's a really good actor, and he plays this record exec really well. I like Tom Hollander a lot as the manager. Gets a lot of great moments of realization, and yeah, So some solid performances here and there. I think that Singer's direction, and to whatever degree there was from Fletcher, his direction, is flashy. I agree that the Live Aid performance is really rousing, but it comes way too late because I think that essentially what they do with the other performances is that they just kind of put them against montages, which is the most tired thing that a biopic can do. And the best biopics have no montages or very, very few. And this is basically essentially one long montage. And I think that that's another problem. It's a problem of this gigantic structure and this gigantic scope of not only a life, but of an entire band's career from beginning to end. And it's kind of like a contradiction. At one point, on one hand, it's really way too long because they're not really giving us very much of the story. And on the other hand, there's too much here to be contained by a movie. So why not just take it over to a miniseries or whatever? Maybe even starring the same people. I'm not against that, but give them better material. I think that they would maybe shine more. So yeah, I really didn't like this until the Live Aid performance, which is great. It's a great scene, but I will say, and maybe this is a cheap cop out, but whatever. Our friend Mark Dusick made a good point in his review. Yeah, it's a great rousing scene, but we have the real thing too, and they basically just replay the whole thing, cutting down some of the stuff, but keeping most of it. And it's a great performance to watch on its own. So all they basically do is just, in a rousing way, recreate an already rousing thing. So it's we've already seen that if we've seen it, if we've seen that performance, um, and I have. So great moments. I think that some positives. Malik's performance gets better as it goes along and as he starts confronting his failing health. He gets his best moments near the end. For instance, uh, a moment where he confronts his band is entirely fictionalized, but it's a great moment. For Malik as a performer, I think that he takes that on very well. There's a doctor's office visit where he doesn't have to say anything. It's all about his reaction, and that's really good. And his relationships as they are given to us are very sweet along the way. From Mary to the character who will eventually become his husband or partner, whatever at that point was. And so there's some strengths here, but the weaknesses way far outweigh the strengths, and I think that for me it just fell way short of being a satisfying biographical picture, and that's what it is primarily. Um, and I think Queen deserves better than this, and so I'm a lot lower than you on it. I'm giving it a D plus. Unfortunately, I think it's pretty bad, honestly. Um, so that's my takeaway. I don't blame you. It's rather high-ish on Rotten Tomatoes. I think I'm gonna look right now to see what it's updated to. It is at 60%. So it's not. I mean, technically, I would be in the minority on that kind of, um, but yeah, that's where I am. I thought it was very, very disappointing, and very forgettable. I'm not gonna remember this movie in a few weeks.
Well,
I would say so.
to be fair, I agree with you. I don't want to ever watch it again. And if we're going to be comparing, concert music movies that we've seen recently, A Star Is Born is better. But I mean, like, so I will give you that. It's not a movie that I'm like eager to watch again. It's just I'm not as like down on it as like most of the people I respect in this industry, where it's like oh, because like I feel. Let me just tell you guys a little secret. Anytime when I like something or dislike something, and like Joel and Mark are the opposite, and some of the people that I see screenings with in Dallas, are the opposite, I do feel kind of dumb. And I gotta learn to just accept it, because I look up to these people, and I always like have to sit down and like wonder like what did I see differently? What is not clicking for me? So it is definitely a blow to my nads when when Joel and Mark vehemently disagree with me, because I'm just like, well, I feel kind of dumb, but it is what it is, and I definitely don't want to watch it again, so I'll give you that.
It's just because you're objectively wrong. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
All right. All right, folks. So I'm just kind of throwing this, Chase. I know that you hate it when I do this. I'm kind of just surprising everybody. I originally had planned to do 2 other reviews, but after talking, I'm sorry, my brain is sludge. So, and especially after 2 long things. So Chase, I'm not going to do any extra reviews tonight.
That's okay. I think talking about Netflix and Bohemian Rhapsody for like an hour and a half apiece, I think
Yes.
that warrants a shorter show. But I mean, obviously,
I guess
people...
I'll just give short like statements. So
Yeah, that'd be fine.
I was originally gonna review The Nutcracker in the Four Realms. Barely anything to say about that movie. It's also a D plus. It's pretty bad. It basically there's a great 3-hour fantasy epic shoved into 93 minutes, and it's just kind of very, very, just very forgettable. And then I also watched, and I really, really wanted to review this on the show, but I might wait and review it maybe on a later episode. I'm not sure in full, but it was The Other Side of the Wind, which is from Orson Welles. It's a really unique special kind of movie. It's not perfect. It's definitely minor wells if there is such a thing. It would be an A minus. I might come back to that and review it because I do want to review an Orson Welles movie on the show. But guys, I will be straight with you. I want to be straight with my listeners, our listeners, I should say. I keep saying our listeners.
Well, Joel, let's be fair. They come to listen to you.
That's true. You barely count. No, I'm just kidding. My brain is like I have a headache. I've had 2 rough days at work. So I'm gonna dispense with those, and I'm gonna set upon our box office numbers. So Chase, we are gonna go through the regular thing with guessing. I'm not gonna get rid of that just because of my headache.
Oh, I hate
So
you. Oh, I hate you so much. I thought you were gonna bypass it, but you
I
just love seeing me
decided.
suffer.
Yeah, I know. I was like, well, I might as well give Chase a headache because I have one. So because I love you, buddy. So your guesses or your hints, whatever, my good sir, my good man, my good friend, are going to be Bohemian Rhapsody, Nobody's Fool, which is the new Tyler Perry movie, and The Nutcracker and the Four Realms. So take it away. Have you heard anything about numbers?
Except for what's number 1, but that was a given.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I'm ready to blow your mind out of your brain helmet. But go ahead with your guesses, sir.
I think that number 1 is Bohemian Rhapsody. Oh, wow, what a shock. So that's number 1. So when Joel said, I'm going to blow your minds, I have a feeling that something amazing happened or kind of weird or off-putting, depending on what you think it is. I think the Nutcracker and the Four Realms bombed, but I think Nobody's Fool got in there somewhere. So here's where I'm thinking. 1 is Rhapsody, 2 is Halloween, 3 is Nobody's Fool, number 4, maybe Venom, and then maybe 5 Nutcracker in the Four Realms. Oh wait, no, I take that back. No, 4 is not Venom. I think number 5 is Venom. 4 is A Star Is Born, and I think a Nutcracker in the Four Realms came in at number 6 or 7.
Okay. Nope. All right.
Okay, so just a simple note. Thank you for that. I am done for the night. Goodbye, ladies and gentlemen.
No, things did not shake out how I thought they would. All right. Dropping from number 1 to number 5 is Halloween.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's first big drop in its run.
Damn.
Third week. Dropped 64.9%. With 11 million. It has, now of course that's not really bad news because this thing has made 150.4 million domestically and 229.6 worldwide. So on a $10 million budget, we're definitely going to be seeing another one of these movies. Dropping from number 2 to number 4 is A Star Is Born with 11.1 million. And that has made domestically 165.6 and worldwide 293.9 on a $36 million budget. It's a big, big, big success.
So I got that right.
Yeah. Definitely so. So debuting at number 3 is Nobody's Fool with 14 million. And worldwide 14.3, but whatever, it's barely been released overseas.
So Joel, what are you talking about? I got 3 of them right. I did pretty well then. You made it seem like I failed on all 5 of them.
Yeah, that's true. I guess
I hate you.
But it's a $19 million movie, so not a bad opening at all. It's actually pretty good opening for something like that, and it's going to do well on streaming too. Debuting at number 2 is The Nutcracker and the Four Realms.
Okay, I did not think it would do that well.
Well, actually, it didn't because it opened with $20 million.
Oh, that's bad.
Yeah, I was talking with a friend when it made $5 million on Friday, and he's like, I feel like somebody needs to get fired for that. And he's pretty right. It doesn't have a listed budget, but it's between 120 and 133. So
Oh.
that puts it into perspective. This thing is a major flop. Overseas, it's worldwide, I should say, it's made 58.5. So this thing is an enormous bomb already, and it's not going to get any better because of the fact that we have The Grinch, Fantastic Beasts, and Ralph Breaks the Internet coming. So those are all going to kind of ruin this movie's chances of doing anything better than this. Those are three gigantic hitters coming up. Specifically, Ralph Breaks the Internet. So that's going to completely kill anything that Nutcracker makes in his fourth weekend. So yeah, that's number 2. And then number 1, yes, Bohemian Rhapsody, huge hit, $50 million this weekend on a $52 million budget, and worldwide it's made 141.7. So it's already huge. Big time. All right, so otherwise, we had the initial release of Boy Erased in 5 theaters. That expands next weekend, and it's the highest per theater average this weekend. It made $220,000. Big time success, $44,000 per theater. Similarly, big success for A Private War, which is that new movie with Rosamund Pike. And that one made $18,000 in each of the theaters that it opened in, for a total of 72 because it opened in 4. So that's pretty impressive. Any big rises that are worthy of talking about? Burning, which I'm about to be watching this week because it opens this week in Dallas, is the new Korean film from Lee Chang-dang. It's getting really great notices. Lee Chang-dong, sorry. Getting great notices. That one rose 120%, made $57,000 this weekend. It's a pretty good number. Suspiria is entering its second weekend, and it's only, widening. It rose 424% and made $964,000 this week. That's a movie that I don't expect to be a great success. It feels like a very niche thing, but certainly will be a success with art house crowds. 2 movies in limited release widening include Beautiful Boy, which I saw last week. I didn't really like it very much, unfortunately, but it rose 116%, made $1 million this week. Pretty good news for Amazon. And the other one is a good segue into what we are going to be reviewing next week. I already mentioned one of the movies, which is Suspiria. And also we are reviewing Can You Ever Forgive Me, which expanded even greater this week and rose 203% and made $1 million. So great news from Fox Searchlight, because that is a big raise. That's some very good news. Otherwise, First Man Keeps Falling. This is really sad to see for this movie, but it fell another 53% this week, and it dropped out of the top 10 only in its 4th week. Made $2 million. Still an impressive number, but yeah, not great news for them. And that's about it. Venom keeps falling in very, very small chunks, so it's doing really well. It's made $198 million domestically and $541 million worldwide. Big time success. It's very much playing like Logan, like I thought it was. All right, that's pretty much it. Any thoughts on the news?
Not really. It sounds like it's kind of creeping all over the place with like Oscar season, with like the limited releases and like all the smaller films kind of rising up. So it's that time, man. I'm excited.
All right, so I guess we'll see you guys next week. You can find me on joelonfilm.com. I don't have any new reviews for this weekend yet. I've, again, had a busy weekend. They should be coming tomorrow. But you can also find me on Twitter at Real Joel Copling, and you can also find the podcast at Real Me In Podcast. It's our new Twitter account for the official podcast. So, Chase, where can people find you?
Yeah, speaking of Twitter, it's at Real Chase Lee, and like Joel said, we have an official Twitter account for the podcast, so go follow that. And of course, on YouTube, I do extra reviews. Like for instance, you got the Girl in the Spider's Web coming. You'll have Widows coming. You'll have probably some more coming. So I will do reviews on there that don't review on the show. And of course, if you like this show, and you're listening on Spreaker, Castbox, iHeartRadio, iTunes, Spotify, wherever, please let everyone know that this is your favorite movie podcast to listen to, and you want to see if they will like it too. We love it when you guys let other people know about it, and all the people that continue to listen, you guys are amazing. This has been episode 252, where we talked about Bohemian Rhapsody, and next week for 253, Joel was correct. We are doing a combined review of Can You Forgive Me, and of course Suspiria, which we haven't done a joint thing in a long time where we review two movies together, so that would be fun to go back to the old school ways. But that will do it for this episode, guys. I'm Chase. That is Joel over there. We'll see you guys next week. Stay awesome. Stay funky fresh. Stay whatever. And we'll see you guys next week for some weirdo horror dance, whatever it is. So there you go.
Bye.